name's Catherine Kirk, and I'm the RSHE leader with the Lead Equate TSA. And we're going to be focusing in this afternoon's session for the next hour on mental wellbeing. So my experience in terms of mental wellbeing, as well as being the RSHE leader for the Lead Equate TSA, I'm also a mental health first aid instructor. And I also work for a company called Optimus doing a wellbeing award for schools. So I've got quite a bit of experience in terms of supporting schools around wellbeing. So I'm hoping that, if you've got any questions as we go along. Hi, Rachel.
Hello there.
You please feel free to ask. I know quite a few of you have got your, you're not showing your videos, but if you want to ask a question, please just ask away. And hopefully it'll give you more information around the mental wellbeing elements of the new guidance. So this is just a little bit about the Lead Equate Teaching School Alliance, and you can see there the sort of breadth of coverage across the East Midlands region. And if I go to the next slide, the opportunities that Lead Equate provide schools with in terms of training. Now, Lead Equate are working in partnership on this RSHE project with the Flying High Partnership and for Derbyshire, and we're two of 18 teaching school alliances across the country that have been awarded funding to support schools with implementing the new RSHE framework. So you can see there the areas that we're covering, which are quite broad, and at the end I'm going to signpost you to the other courses that we're offering across the next term. So this briefing really uses the materials from the DFE. So the DFE have prepared these materials and we've added some of their elements to them. And I've given the link there, so when you get the slides, you can click on that link and it will take you to the slides if you're not already, if you don't already have them. And on the link there's also some links to some useful videos that you might want to use as well in terms of classroom practice. So our aims then are really to explore the outcomes of the new RSHE guidance and really sort of to break those down to think about how we might cover those different aspects within the full curriculum. And at the moment, obviously, with the schools being open to more students, we're also thinking about the impact that COVID-19 has had on wellbeing, both of pupils but also of the wider school community. I'll be signposting to some good practice and resources, and also thinking about how we deal with tricky questions and comments as well. So yes, this is the Teaching Mental Wellbeing, which is part of the health education part of the new RSHE framework. And that is one of the statutory elements, meaning that parents cannot withdraw from that and that schools have to make it part of their practice. Now, I would imagine that a lot of you have already been delivering work around emotional wellbeing and mental health, and this really just strengthens that work. Okay, so what really your starting point for this work is thinking about what is the current situation for you in your school. And I guess that the curriculum has some flexibility in terms of how you deliver it, because it needs to really relate to the needs of the pupils within your setting. So what are the priorities around wellbeing and how are you going to find that out? So I don't know whether anyone's done any sort of surveying of pupils already as they've come back. So finding out, yes, you're nodding, well, the only person I can see is nodding. Do you want to tell us a bit about what you've done so far?
I will. Sorry, 2 seconds. My phone's just gone. I'm just going to switch it off. Sorry.
Right. So hopefully Rachel can fill us in a bit on what she's been doing and what the current issues are. Yes,
I'm
Rachel.
back. Sorry. Sorry, trying to juggle everything. Yeah, we've sort of done a survey that had gone out just before the schools went back, just to capture where the children were, but also the parents' feelings about the children returning to school. And we also did that for staff as well. So what we were trying to do is just capture a picture of how everybody was before they came back. And we've just been doing a few updates. The structure of our schools is slightly different. I work for a group of schools, so I work for a group of independent schools. So there's 25 of them across England, Ireland, Scotland and Wales. So we've been back at Scotland for 2 weeks now, and Northern Ireland started a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, just capturing how everybody is and trying to listen and respond to make sure children, staff and parents are all, and teachers are comfortable as they go back.
Great, brilliant, and that's really great practice. Now I'm sure that some of you others have done some of that as well, and it's a really important starting point for this work. So just some key statistics, and there are many, and you can find probably lots on different aspects of mental health, but I thought these were quite stark for us to think about. So 1 in 8 children and young people are affected by mental health problems, and over half of all mental ill health disorders start before the age of 14, and just gives us a rationale really, in case we needed one. I'm sure you're well aware of the mental health issues facing children and young people, but it gives us a sort of a way of I guess justifying why this work is so important. Hi Sam. Not yet connected. Okay, so obviously during the coronavirus, we've been supporting children's well-being, and as they're coming back into school, or more of them are coming back into school, these issues are going to be playing out. They're going to be more prevalent, and I guess there's a certain thought that actually we need to be supporting children to regain that sense of normality and the sort of structure and some of those routines of school which can support well-being. But also it's about thinking that this could have longer term impact on the well-being of pupils, and that it's not going to be a quick fix for some of them, because the fears and anxiety that may exist around COVID will still be ongoing for many children. So it's about thinking, of how you're going to embed that work over the coming year. And thinking about the impacts and offering students the opportunity to develop coping skills. So how are we going to support children to think about self-care, particularly when we know that some of the experiences of children within that lockdown period may have been traumatic. They may have experienced things that they wouldn't otherwise have done had they been within the school setting. So we can talk about the experiences during the outbreak, but I think it's also important that, like I said before, we do establish that sense of normality and moving forward, and maybe identifying some of the positives that might have come out of coronavirus, so spending time with family, or the renewed sort of building those friendships again that we had before the outbreak began. And also thinking about the wider enrichment activities that young people can take part in, that will equally build their well-being. Okay, so there's some information here on supporting children who are bereaved, and some links there. If I can just, oops, how do I? Actually, I'll show you the links at the end. There's a link to some bereavement advice, and there's also Winston's Wish. I don't know if any of you had support from Winston's Wish previously around bereavement. And thinking about how we support those children who may have experienced loss and bereavement whilst that period of COVID, whether down to COVID or another issue. We need to allow children the opportunity to talk that through, and some of that will be around your pastoral support, your if you've got a counselling service or a wellbeing team within your setting. but also we need to be looking through the curriculum, and probably not immediately, because it's all, you know, very, you know, we're sort of settling children down, but looking towards within your programme, how do you cover loss and bereavement? How do we encourage young people to speak about their feelings around that? Okay, so teaching the new curriculum. As I said, this is part of the statutory health education part of the new guidance. And it's about recognising the challenges that young people experience, and how we can support them with those problems that are arising. And I think one of the important things when we think about teaching is, for all of us as teachers, what are our own values and attitudes around this subject? What are our views about mental health? And what are our own experiences of mental well-being and mental health, and possibly mental ill health? And how is that going to impact on our teaching? And I always think it's really useful, particularly with all of PSHE topics, to think about our own views and values before we teach. And if you're working with other staff in your school, again, I think it's really important to encourage them to think about that as well, particularly, you know, the experiences that staff might have had over the lockdown period, and how that might, you know, impact on them teaching about mental well-being. Okay, so within the framework, the outcomes are split up into primary and secondary. However, there is flexibility in what you cover. So based on the needs of your pupils, it may be that you want to think about some of the secondary outcomes as well. So I am going to take you through some of those briefly. So what it says is that, you know, you've got that sort of foundation of outcomes in primary. If the needs of your pupils are such that you want to go on into more depth to some of the secondary outcomes, then you can do that. Okay, so the starting point really is that we want young people to know that most young people have good mental well-being most of the time, and we really want to sort of think about that continuum. So what is good mental well-being? And if you can unmute yourselves for a moment, let's just have a discussion. What is good mental well-being? What is it that we're wanting? Anybody?
Children to kind of recognise things that gives them good well-being, if you see what I mean, things that they need to have in their lives. So in terms of like the 5 ways of well-being and things like that. Yeah.
Good. Yes, we're going to look at the 5 ways to well-being. Yeah. Any other things that we think we would be wanting children to know in terms of good mental well-being?
That regulating of emotions, and that understanding of you know, it's okay to demonstrate those emotions, and modelling that as a member of staff as well. You know, yeah, it's okay to worry about that, especially at the moment. I know there's been a lot of reassurance when children are saying, I'm worried about going back to school. The response is, that's okay. You know, that's okay, you don't have to worry. You know, you can say that. Everybody is worried. That's an appropriate thing, rather than, nope, you don't need to worry about that. Yeah, great, that's fine. You're well done for sharing.
Yes, and that range, and that's you know, one of the outcomes in the guidance is around that sort of the range of normal, and what is a normal emotion. And I had a lovely quote from a young person last week that, you know, it's okay to feel sad, but it's not okay to feel sad all of the time, or if you feel sad all of the time, you need to get support for that. So thinking about that, you know, range of emotions, and that all we may experience all of them at some time, or some of them actually at the same time. And then once we've established a sort of sense of what is good well-being, then we can think about you know, what might signify that someone is experiencing poor mental well-being, what are some of the factors that might contribute to that, and positive strategies to improve well-being as well. Now, obviously, in my mind, emotional well-being and mental health is kind of a thread, a sort of golden thread that runs through all of those other subjects that we're teaching about through PSHE or RSHE. I mean, you know, if we think about relationships, you know, relationships involve emotions. You know, it's got anti-bullying there, it's got internet, and again, you know, what have young people been seeing online? What is the impact of all of that messaging and news, and, you know, all of those things that they might have been seeing online on their well-being? Talks about the physical health, healthy eating. What it doesn't mention there, and I think is, you know, particularly important at primary, is the emotional impact of puberty and how that impacts both emotionally and physically, and how are we making those links. And I think that's really important when we are teaching our RSHE or PSHE, whatever we call it, to make those links for children. So when we're talking about relationships, we're pulling out the fact, how do you think that person feels about that? Or when we're talking about anti-bullying, you know, how does it feel to be in that situation, both in the short term, but the longer term impact of that? You know, looking at scenarios around internet safety, how do those people feel? And we're bringing it back to that and making those links and developing vocabulary and connections for young people. Okay, and so it's pupils with SEND, and you know, we know that they are more likely to have wellbeing needs, and thinking about how we adapt lessons to enable all young people to get the information and support that they need. There's a really useful document called Know Your Normal, which is by Ambitious About Autism, and it's Know Your YOUR Normal, and it's about young people identifying what for them is normal. And you know, I think it's a really interesting tool, because how do we identify when a child with autism's anxiety is increased? Because some of their behaviours that they show on a daily basis might be normal for them, so that's their normal. So how do we then identify when something isn't normal for them, when they're feeling more anxious than what would be their normal? So yeah, have a look at that. It's probably aimed more at sort of upper primary, lower secondary, but I've seen other schools sort of develop passports and things like that, so that you can actually you know, so teachers know what sort of behaviours that young person normally has. Okay, and then if we think about safeguarding, so obviously some of the things that we're talking about within emotional wellbeing and mental health might be triggering for some young people. They might feel upset by some of the things that we discussed, and it's about thinking beforehand how it might impact on young people. And then when we're delivering, make sure that we are setting ground rules or a group agreement for the session. And I think sometimes group agreements are kind of thrown about, like, you know, let's have a group agreement, and then they're never used. And actually it should be a working document that guides the learning in the session. And ideally that would be created by the young people, so they have some ownership of that. It might be part of your class rules, it might be an extension of them, and it, you know, really kind of sets the climate for learning, and, you know, sort of informs young people of where they can go for help and what the boundaries are in terms of confidentiality. So here's some good practice, which I think we've just about covered. So discussed and understood by all, clear and practical, modelled by the teacher, making sure they're being followed consistently, so being referred back to in lessons rather than just kind of doing it in the first lesson and it never being talked about again. It needs to be part of each lesson or each activity that you're doing. It can be updated, and it has some sanctions. So, you know, what do we feel as a class if somebody breaks those rules? How are we going to handle that? What would be appropriate for that? So just some examples of how you might develop effective ground rules or group agreement. So Diamond 9, so getting different cards with rules on, getting the young people to prioritise which they feel are most important in a diamond shape. You could just have some class discussion. So what rules do you think would be important to help us keep safe in this lesson? Brainstorming, so what do we need to feel safe and feel able to contribute? Some kind of snowball activity, so getting the children in groups, getting them to come up with some ideas for rules and then joining with another group, sort of narrowing down what their rules are or crossing out those that are similar. Or small group discussion on different rules, so you could give them some rules, get them to think about what that actually means in practice. So how do we show that we're adhering to this rule, and how will that make us feel? And then it gives an example of some ground rules there. So privacy, listening to others, no judgment, right to pass. And again, I think that's quite important in a topic like emotional wellbeing, mental health, that young people can opt out or, you know, pass rather than sort of feeling on the spot. And also thinking about questions as well. So in terms of protecting children and the teacher, questions are great, but no personal questions. So we're not going into the realms of the personal. But, you know, we can use someone I know scenarios. Any questions so far? No? Okay.
None from me.
Oh, great. Thank you, Sam. So this is the spectrum I talked about before, and I think we've touched on that in terms of healthy to unwell. And we all, I mean, I guess if we were to sort of plot ourselves on this, we might be at different points now to how we were 3 months ago or 9 months ago or a year ago or 10 years ago. So, you know, it's useful to think of wellbeing as a spectrum and a continuum rather than a fixed state. And that's okay. We might move up and down at different points. And I guess one thing to consider is, how do we help children to understand that spectrum? That, you know, it's okay not to be okay. And, you know, that's something to think about as you progress planning your curriculum. Okay, so it says there just to make links and refer to the guidance for physical health and mental well-being. So these are then the outcomes from the statutory guidance. These are on page 32 and 33 of the guidance, and it sort of gives us a breakdown of how we might cover this. So the statutory guidance says mental well-being is a normal part of daily life in the same way as physical health. So thinking with younger pupils of things that they value, enjoy, are good at, and how that supports mental well-being. And then positive relationships, eating, sleeping well, can also help. And then with older children, encouraging them to think about how they can support the well-being of others as well as themselves. So there's the 5 steps to well-being there. Did we did somebody say them before? What are the 5 steps to wellbeing? Anybody want to tell me?
Be active, or something along those lines.
What? Sorry, that's that, Sam?
Be active, or something along those lines.
Yes, be active. Yeah. Any others?
Continue to learn. It's about learning new things every day, isn't it? I don't know quite the actual wordings.
Yep.
Of them.
Yep.
There
we go. I'll let you off the hook.
Yeah, connect. Yeah.
Learning new skills. Yeah. So these are the 5 steps to mental wellbeing, the NHS ones. And I don't know how many of you have used these already within your work with pupils, but I think they're quite useful for structuring work and moving forward. So that connection, and that's a key one, isn't it, with coronavirus, that young people may have missed out on, that sort of face-to-face connection with others. And I guess you could reflect on how that was, how that made them feel, not being connected to their friends in such a major way. Being physically active, and I guess that it's really useful when we're doing PE, things like that, to make those links with wellbeing. So how do you feel after going out and doing your daily mile, or doing that PE activity? How did it make you feel? Or achieving that challenge that we set you, how do you feel after that? And kind of making those connections, bringing it back to wellbeing, that actually when someone's feeling low, if they go and try something, learn a new skill, go out for a run, it can really help. And I think that's sometimes a difficult one, although it's quite a simple, to think of it like that. I think it's sometimes difficult when you feel low to think, if I go out for a run, I'm going to feel better. So it's encouraging that knowledge and awareness. Giving to others, so thinking about how we can build in opportunities for young people to show giving to others, community work, etc., and then paying attention to the present moment. So that's the mindfulness type activities.
Catherine, there is some work that was happening in the south of Lincolnshire last year, where a head teacher's gone on a sabbatical in the Stamford area, and they're doing a bit of a project on the 5 ways of wellbeing, delivering that kind of public health message.
Oh, great.
We're just kind of starting with that, where every day we're reflecting on how we've achieved those, how we've built those into our day.
Brilliant.
But the impact that it had on staff and children's wellbeing was quite dramatic. So, I mean, in terms of that consultation process, you kind of engaging with the parents and community and things like that. We're just kind of in the really early days, but there was some really promising kind of results from that.
Brilliant. Great. And I guess that process of reflection is really important as well, isn't it? Is that across school then, Sam, with each year group?
Yeah, it is cross school. So we've introduced reflective journals from year 1 upwards. So some children can draw. So they are just kind of from the ESPO, kind of the plain and the wide line. So children, again, it can be a draw or write kind of thing.
Yeah.
And we'll do that kind of at the end of the day, or a good time, really, just kind of reflect on that. With the staggered starts and ends, we've kind of got a definitive, we're doing like a 9 till 3, but we've got a little bit before and a little bit after, where some children are here and some children aren't. So it's good that we can do things like that at the moment.
Brilliant. Great, thanks for sharing that, Sam. And if anyone's got anything else that they share or think would be useful to others, please do. So yes, this was what we were saying, the next one, around the normal range of emotions, and thinking about how we teach children about emotions when they start within the school. They may not have the language or the understanding of some of those terms, and how we can support them to understand and learn. And also that, in different situations we might experience different things, and for different people in the same situation, they might experience something different. So it gives some stages there of the different emotions that you might use based on developmental stage. And I always think that books are a great way to explore emotions. So if you're reading books anyway within the class, using that as a way to explore some of that. One of my favourite books that I used to read to my son is this one, which is called The Hugs and Kisses Contest, and it explores jealousy. So it's about a young boy who thinks that his mum loves his sister more than him, and it's you know, really, I mean, jealousy is quite a complex emotion that children might not know exactly what that is that they're feeling, but it's, you know, exploring that and showing that there's enough love for everybody. So, you know, finding books, stories, little clips that can help to explore some of those more complex emotions. I mean, embarrassment, again, you know, difficult to kind of describe. How do we, you know, how does embarrassment feel inside us? How does it look? How might you recognize embarrassment in somebody else? And you know, I think that's all really important learning for children. And that was interesting. False emotions, so pretending to like a present, you know, which some people are better at than others. But you know, sort of recognizing you know, why we might do that, and what we're trying to achieve with that. And then thinking about triggers, so what might trigger an emotional reaction, and whether it's you know, within the boundaries of what we would consider a normal range of emotion. And sometimes when we're feeling low, or our mental health is kind of more towards the right hand side on the spectrum, things become bigger. You know, it's at the moment, it may be that way for some children, that they've experienced all of that change and things are kind of more, you know, heightened for them. Thinking about how behaviour of others can affect our own and others' well-being. And then with older children, thinking about the impact of life events and how that might impact. So particularly things like parents separating, and factors that can affect their mood, so preferences, their responsibilities, etc. Then knowing how to recognise and talk about emotions and the vocabulary of words to use when talking about their own and others' feelings. A lot of this, I don't know if a lot of you were around for the SEAL. Has anyone still got the SEAL materials in their school? A lot of this is the stuff that used to be part of the SEAL program. Some schools, I'm sure, still use that.
We still use aspects of it, yeah,
and it's still really valid.
it's still really good, yeah.
And a lot of the new stuff that comes out is kind of, you know, sometimes reinventing some of that information, because it was, you know, there was some really good materials in there, and they can be used to fulfill you know, these outcomes. And then challenging older pupils to talk in more complex and nuanced ways about how events and people may make them feel happy, sad, anxious, upset, and recognising others' emotions. And I think for a lot of this work around emotions, thinking about scenarios is a really good way of learning, whether that be from a book or one that you've made up. You know, these two children, this has happened, how do they both feel? You know, what support might they need? Is what they're feeling you know, appropriate to this situation that's occurred? If not, why are they feeling so much worse about something? So yeah, finding ways for them to explore that. Just check the, oh gosh, time. I need to hurry up. Okay, so know how to judge whether what they're feeling and how they're feeling, know what they are feeling and how they are behaving is appropriate. I think we've talked a little bit about that. So practicing emotions and behaviour, and again, scenario-based learning can really help with that, and thinking about the triggers. benefits of physical activity, and I think this is where you're drawing those links with the physical activity that they're they're doing anyway. So the sort of PE or your daily mile or any other physical activity, the clubs that you're doing, making those links with wellbeing and how it can improve wellbeing for us. Social activity, so contact with other people, participating in clubs, that can be again more tricky for some children than others. It might be a real big ask for them to join a club or go somewhere where they don't know people. Helping out with volunteering projects. I went to this school where they'd been involved in this Rotary project, where basically the children had grown plants and then they'd taken them and left them. You probably couldn't do this at the moment because of COVID, but left them on people's doorsteps, just with a little note of the school. And the benefit was that all these people who received these plants emailed the school, and some of the stories that the people were sharing were really emotional about how that plant left on the doorstep on that day had made such a difference. And then young people knowing that they have the ability to make that impact, to make somebody feel better, I think is so powerful. And there are lots of different ways that can be done. So there's been quite a lot I've seen online with people writing letters to people in care homes, for example, getting pen pals in care homes, and all of that stuff, which is really, really powerful, both for the person receiving it but also for the young person that has made that happen, for improving their
we did that with Easter bunnies. The children made little pom-pom Easter bunnies and hung them just outside people's houses. So there was no contact, but they did it over the Easter holidays, and as a result they now have a very good friend in an old gentleman who lives on the corner, around the corner, who says hello to them every time they go past. And it just makes his day, and he says he loves the little chat. But yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And the care home writing thing, that's something that's been taken up by the Scout Association as well, so there's been a big push for that.
Yeah, just those simple things that we can do that can impact on somebody else. And I think that's a really important part of this curriculum, is thinking about our own feelings but also how we can change things for others. Positive routines and sleep. So the routines, thinking, and I think this becomes particularly relevant as children get older, get towards the sort of puberty stage, wanting to stay up late, pushing those boundaries, and it's about recognizing why sleep is important to well-being. I don't know whether, Sam, you've been involved in this, or anyone else from Lincolnshire. I believe there's a company that do workshops in schools where they make sleep masks and dream catchers as a way of exploring the importance of sleep. So it's kind of learning through craft, which again I think is really good, because not only are you creating something and you have the great thing of learning a new skill and having something you've created, but also you're thinking about why sleep is important.
No, I've not heard of that one.
Yeah, it was a school out, I think it was in Spilsby where I was at, where they'd done that. I'm sure it was a company they'd brought in to do that. And then self-care. So children understanding how they can make positive connections, reflecting on how those things impact. So I don't know whether anyone saw on RSHE Day, one of my colleagues did a self-care plan, daily plan, and it was so simple but really effective. What is it that I need to do today to help myself to feel better? It doesn't have to involve a lot of money or resources. What are those things that make me feel good? And it could just be having a hot chocolate, or reading a book, or spending some time with somebody. And then knowing that isolation and loneliness can affect children. So teaching children the difference between boredom, isolation and loneliness. And I guess being alone as well, because actually spending time alone can be a positive thing for well-being. Just taking some time out can be positive. boredom. I'm bored. I don't know how many of you heard that over lockdown, but you know, boredom can actually lead to really positive things. You know, let's be creative. Let's take our boredom and you know, build it into something. But then thinking about isolation, and again, that's where looking at your communities, looking at who can support within communities can help. Thinking about those elderly people that might be on their own. How does that feel? How does it feel when we're lonely? We can even be lonely when we're with other people, and that goes back to your relationships curriculum. So it all sort of weaves in. And then thinking about things like joining clubs, how we make friends, again linking in with some of the outcomes from some of the other sections around relationships. And then, you know, we obviously want to be signposting to support. So ideally in every lesson or activity and on displays in the school, we're thinking about where young people can get support, both within school and outside of school. And if they feel lonely, where can they go? And that it's okay to seek support with that. And this links in again with the relationship side with the bullying. You've got Anti-Bullying Week coming up, which is United Against Bullying, which is the theme for this year. There's some free materials on the Anti-Bullying Alliance site, so you could have a look at those. It's the 16th to 20th of November this year. So opportunities to explore the impact of bullying, and again, case studies, scenarios, you know, thinking about how bullying impacts are important. When to ask for help. So again, you know, when do children need to seek support? And you could go back to that sort of spectrum. You know, if we're feeling sad, who do we talk to? When do we need to get support, and who is appropriate at different stages along that spectrum? Okay, so that's about trusted adults. And if you've got support within your school, so if you've got a counsellor or a sort of hub or a team, or, you know, whoever supports young people, make sure that that is, you know, children know about that and they're reminded about it on a regular basis. This is sort of thinking about the that it's common to experience mental well-being, and you know, we can explore with children that sometimes people need help, just like sometimes with a physical illness we would seek help. We wouldn't just, you know, have a broken leg and just keep walking on it and, you know, putting up with it. We would seek help. And, you know, that's the same with mental well-being, and understanding that sometimes we need help from a medical professional. And this is an interesting one. People can seem happy but still need help. So, you know, and I think this is useful for teachers as well to think about, in terms of not every child will present in the same way. Some young people may be hiding how they're feeling. Okay, I'm going to skip over secondary. It's on the slide, so you can sort of have a look. It builds on the primary, so connection. This is where it sort of looks more at specific mental ill health. And at primary, you might want to, things like anxiety, for example, or stress, you might want to cover in more depth as part of your primary provision. So these are all the secondary ones. Examples of good practice. So I think we've touched on most of that. Ensuring pupils know who they can talk to. If you've got a pupil who you know has experienced mental health issues or is experiencing a particular issue at that time, giving them some context ahead of a lesson where you think it might, you know, they might have some difficulties, just so that they know and they're aware of what's going to be covered. Beginning and ending on a positive, so, you know, some kind of positive message or song or an activity to make sure that they're leaving on a positive note, and the atmosphere in the room. And embedding early signs of wellbeing concerns is important. So how does someone know when they are well? What do people notice when their wellbeing isn't right? And I think all of that can come through some of those other things we talked about with the outcomes, thinking about different scenarios, thinking about different people, how they might respond. There's some support organisations there. Ideally, I mean, you'd hope that children would want to seek support from somebody in school or somebody, a trusted adult, but you know, raising awareness of Childline. I know that the NSPCC do sessions, don't they, in schools to raise awareness of Childline as well, so those are useful. Now, these are just some other things that we've come up with in terms of how you can support, and I'm sure some of these will be familiar. So some kind of stations within classrooms where children can identify how they are feeling. Does anybody have those? So when they come into the classroom, the children put a peg or a stick or, you know.
Yeah, we have feelings boards.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have something similar.
Yeah, so a really good way of children being able to identify their own feelings, and also recognising that, again, sometimes it's okay to feel sad, but if someone's thing was in sad every single day for a month, then, you know, it would signify a bigger problem potentially. All these celebration and reward systems, so celebrating achievements, helping young people to think about what they're good at, raising their self-esteem. Does anyone do anything like meditation, yoga, mindfulness?
Yoga's really popular here. The children love yoga.
Yeah. I went to a school where they had screens outside with yoga positions at break, so the children could kind of do yoga within their lunchtime, which I thought was interesting. But yeah, anything like that on a regular basis, getting children into the habit of doing it. We've talked about community projects, giving children responsibility. Again, I know that that's part and parcel of the work you do at primary, you know, playground monitors, all of that kind of thing. Identify wellbeing champions who are going to lead sort of wellbeing work within school, within pupils, and think about what their role might be. You might already have things like playground buddies, you know, buddy bench, things like that. What else can those children do or help others with? Assemblies, linking in with themed days. So there's lots of themed days that we can use. Mental health day, there's a mental health week. There's lots of different ones. And if you look on, where did I write that down? I've written it down somewhere. On the Time to Change website, there's a list of themed mental health awareness days. Circle time and books, we've talked about. Having displays in school around wellbeing. Quite a few schools I've been in have used the Inside Out characters. Anyone use those?
Yeah, we're using those in Key Stage 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've done some work with those as well.
Yeah, so you know, a useful way of sort of identifying those different feelings through characters. And then, you know, crafts, the things about dream catchers and sleep masks, and, you know, loads of different things that we can do to support around the curriculum that are supporting that. So that's just some examples of zones and how we are feeling. This one school I went into had this lovely little, I don't know anything about Harry Potter, but apparently it was something to do with Harry Potter. It was like a little space under the stairs where children could go and sit, and it was like, you know, got books and nice images and things, just a sort of calm space. Don't know whether anyone has those in the classroom where children can just take a bit of time out if they need to. And then just some links to some resources. This PSHE Association have some free schemes for Key Stage 1 and 2. BBC have got a growth mindset and wellbeing video. Partnership for Children, so they were designed for use during lockdown but can be adapted, place to be. And then Anna Freud has loads of different resources, and I suspect there'll be lots more coming out, but equally, like we were saying before, some of those older, what would class as older resources are still relevant, like the SEAL, etc. And you may already have a scheme that you're following, and that will, if that's mapped to the new guidance, I'm sure that will have emotional wellbeing activities as well. And then just sort of thinking about the difficult questions and comments that might come up. Obviously, we've got our group agreement that we can kind of guide content and keep children safe, but just have a think about how we might respond to this. So my mum's sad all the time. Is it my fault because I'm naughty? So what would you say? What wouldn't you say? How would you follow up? And how could this have been prevented, or did we want it to be prevented? What do we think?
I would sort of kind of probe a little bit more rather than answering, and kind of sort of what makes you say that. So kind of can find out, because I'm reading between the lines, that something, you know, something's happened at home and then someone said that's how they're making them feel maybe, or something like that. So rather than having to give an answer, which, you know, this it will just kind of avoid that and just probe into a little bit more and have a bit more of a discussion about it.
Yeah. Would you do that in the class or afterwards, or?
Yeah, no, afterwards, one-on-one or in a quiet area, but with staff that they know, so it can still be class teacher or TA. It doesn't need to, you know, we've got a kind of ELSA in school. It doesn't then need to be kind of escalated and say, oh, you need to go and speak to someone about that. It's just one of those normal questions that can be dealt with in the class, and depending on what the answer is, you might, you know, you'd like to think you would inform parents because they're feeling a bit how they're feeling about it, but obviously if it threw up any safeguarding ones, you'd double check first.
Yeah. Any other thoughts?
Obviously, it totally depends on the child that you're dealing with, because you know your class best. So, I mean, it depends on that child and what you know about them already. But maybe something that it will, how do you know that your mum's sad all the time? Like, what sort of things makes you think that she's sad? And then sort of that sort of way in, because depending on the child, I mean, they might not mean sad as sad. They could have just got the words totally mixed up, and so it just depends on the age and what that child is like. So yeah, it's a bit hard, these kind of scenarios, aren't they? Because there can be 101 different ways around everything. But I mean, like the lady just said that just spoke, depending on what the outcome of that is, would depend on what, if you would even need follow up, or, you know, if like you say, if there was anything that we needed to do from that and support them further, would depend on the answers, because it's just, you know, it needs a bit of unpicking a little bit. So
yeah, and I guess obviously, you know, as teachers, you are best placed to support the children with their questions, and it's just worth those staff that, you know, it's worth thinking about questions that might come up or comments that might come up and how you might deal with those. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily an issue that this child has said this, because it's raised something that they're worried about, obviously. So I don't think we should shy away from disclosures, but it's about them knowing where is the best way to kind of raise those things, which might not be within the classroom setting, but them having the opportunity, and lots of opportunities to, you know, share concerns. And it may be that something in the lesson has kind of just triggered and thought, oh, well, my mum's sad all the time. So yeah, I think you're right in terms of, you know, using your professional judgment. I think the other thing is thinking about, you know, whether you have a question box which is either specific to PSHE, RSHE, or is in the classroom all of the time. You know, allowing children the opportunity to mark whether they want that question answered individually or in a group setting. Some schools have the sort of those worry monsters, don't they, with the zips, but you could equally make one out of a shoebox. Just encouraging children to ask those questions, explore concerns, but in a way that is safe for them and for others. And obviously just being sensitive to that.
Yeah, I mean, I probably wouldn't say, yeah, it is your fault, that's why your mum's sad. Probably not the right response.
Don't say that.
That's one I wouldn't probably go with. But
Yeah.
sort of like when you've been talking, all the kind of things that you've been saying, I've sort of been going, yeah, we're doing that. Because this week at our school, we're doing like a transition unit.
Yeah.
And so in year 3-4, we're doing the Worryosaurus.
Yeah.
So as part of that, they're making their own like little creature that they can tell their worries to. We're having a worry box that they can put their worries into. It's loads of circle time. It's all based around this book. We're looking at the characters' feelings and why might they feel like that, and making posters. And he gets in this cave and he feels all sad, and how if your friend was in a cave, how they could like talk you out by saying nice things. So all those kind of things are built into sort of a 2-week unit that we're basing on a book as well. So it's really good, and they're doing that throughout the school, but on different books. So it fits perfectly with sort of everything you're saying, really.
Brilliant. That's good. And I think what's very telling, Annika, is that I did have actually a few more booked on to this training, but there's I think 6 or 7 of you at the moment, and on the secondary one there's 18. And I think that actually primaries tend to be a lot better at thinking about emotions and feelings.
I think it's easier for us because we tend to be on a smaller site. There tends to be less children. Obviously the primary school children don't move around and they're sort of with you for the whole year, so it is easier in that respect. But yeah, I can see
build
why.
those relationships, I guess, don't you? And
it's quicker, and it just, the children, you just get that relationship within a few days. Yeah, so it's good.
Yeah, cool. Right, I'm just any questions? There we go. Did you have any questions? We're over time now, 1 minute. But there's just the other training opportunity. You've probably seen them. There's some various different briefings that are happening throughout the term. I know that Sam, you've been on the enhanced training as well, haven't you? I don't know whether anyone else has been on the enhanced training, but that's available as well. Any questions? Whew, whistle stop tour.
Thank you. I think you've covered everything for me.
Great. I'm sensing that you probably, sometimes the people that come on these courses are those that are already doing great work, I find.
Yeah, but it's nice to hear you go, and you sort of should be doing this and thinking about this, and at least then I'm like, yep, I know we're on the right lines here, so just keep moving forward with the good practice and what we're doing. So it's nice to hear. Great,
and lovely to see you all. I'll get Donna to send out the slides. These are the sort of, like I say, the adapted ones. You can also access just the DFE ones, and there'll be more coming out over the autumn term for each of the different themes within the guidance. Great. So if no one's got any further questions, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.